Admiral John Yamamoto took his place on the bridge of the Juggernaut-class vessel, the starship Prometheus, and after seating himself he said, "Engage," and the fleet leapt to warp. It was the largest assembly of ships in the history of the Terran Empire. 80 battleships, a Titan, a Juggernaut, 6 cruisers, 9 destroyers, and 2 frigates that had been in service since before Earth even had a single colony to its name. Compared to the armada of 8 ships that had brought the Ediaxa Empire to its knees, the difference was night and day. But on the other side of the hyperlane lay the Sacred Dark's armadas, backed by a powerful citadel. It was the lion's share of their resources. According to intel, they have 99 vessels of varying strengths, but that citadel is strong enough to blow a hole through a goddamn planet, or so they say. It was an unpleasant thought, probably more a bluff than anything, and not the type of battle he liked. In the Ediaxa War, he'd been able to utilize keen strategy and cripple the enemy to break them without a real fight. Now he was forced to take an enormous gamble that they could wreak havoc on the fleet, their strongest citadel, and hopefully still have enough power to destroy the other 4 outposts of the Sacred Dark that they depended upon for security. Shift cycle after shift cycle at hyperwarp, Admiral Yamamoto alternated between days of drill and days of rest, driving his people hard to prepare them for the coming fight. His one comfort? There's no way they'll actually expect us to invade, so we should get the first shots off. He held on to that thought a great deal, right up until the moment they emerged into the Balelus system, and the vast armadas of the Sacred Dark sprung into view. "Fire!" He shouted the command across the fleet communications, and the torpedoes of the humans launched from hundreds of ports, racing over the space between the 2 forces while the Sacred Dark scrambled to come about and respond. Lightning shots ripped across the void, followed by bright white plasma and penetrating javelins. Guns began to open up as the distance closed. Shields flared on both sides as the fight began to spread out on a broad front. A human battleship ignited as the weapons of the Citadel locked in on that one vessel, as if to say, "Fuck you in particular." Fire lit up the dark for a moment, as the crew of 600 all died at once. But the casualties were not only with mankind. Battleships of the Sacred Dark began to erupt as well. "Titan, target their citadel! If we can blow that to Kingdom Come, they might retreat." That had its appeal. Forcing a withdrawal would buy time for reinforcements, repair, and they could fight a running series of engagements to wear the Sacred Dark down through attrition at their own speed. The Titan hammered the citadel, the shields flaring with every blast until they began to collapse. The Sacred Dark's vessels began to reform, shielding the citadel with their ships as if they too were armor, moving only to let the stationary target fire again and destroy another human warship. The fact that they lived their whole lives in space and learned to use them from birth gave the wiggly aliens a distinct advantage, rotating their ships to ensure the strongest shield was always in the way. Even when it meant temporarily disabling their weapons, they began to exact a deadly toll. 2 more ships exploded in the night, weakening the human fleet, followed by a third when a Sacred Dark ship moved aside to allow a blast of energy to strike a cruiser and end the lives of a crew of 300. A moment of grim inspiration struck the Admiral as the toll of victory was made clear. "Ramming speed!" Admiral Yamamoto ordered. "Target their center. Open fire with everything you have on their left wing. Let's see how brave the Sacred Dark is when they have a Juggernaut bearing down on them." "Sir," the helm replied, and the engines flared behind the ship as power was increased, and the speed of the Juggernaut tripled. It didn't hit the Sacred Dark right away as to just what the human admiral was doing, but it did not take long. With their ships arrayed in a line, they had moved only up or down to allow a clean shot from their citadel, and that meant that veering out of the way to the left or right was impossible. They scrambled, breaking formation, sometimes just a little too late, and added their death flames to the night, defying the darkness they so loved in their final moments of life. The Prometheus continued its forward momentum, and the other captains rushed their ships into the gap, focusing their fire on the left wing just as their admiral had done, forcing more scrambling by the Sacred Dark as they tried to reform a cohesive defensive front. As the stronger close-range weapons came into use, the shields of the Citadel died completely, and the Prometheus became the default target, only to find that the Terrans were no less brave, and rushed their ships in behind the capital ship to absorb fire for it, just as the Sacred Dark had done for their starbase. The ramming speed of the Prometheus did not slow down, until the unstoppable force met the immovable object. Admiral Yamamoto held the smile on his face until the burning heat destroyed his flesh in one single painless moment of smug satisfaction. "Job well done," he thought at his final moment. Fire erupted in 1,000 places, and it seemed to both sides as if time had stopped. Whatever the Sacred Dark expected to protect themselves from, a suicide run was not on the list. The Terran Armada opened fire again. Their rear ships quickly formed a line that outflanked the remaining Sacred Dark vessels. Though the Terran Armada had been reduced by 20, the loss of the Citadel and the crippling of a number of Sacred Dark vessels, not to mention the collapse of their line, had turned the tide. Taking fire from two sides, the Sacred Dark ships began to light up, and their attempt at reforming into a third defensive line saw those withdrawing ships hit in the rear, and this time, thanks to the heavy fire, when their shields gave out, their engines quickly followed. The Sacred Dark Armada underwent a collapse. From its beginnings at over 99 vessels, they were now losing a ship almost every minute and growing. The Terran Empire's ships continued the encirclement, as there were ever fewer left to be encircled. Until the last ship burst into its death nova in the darkness. "This is Captain Sarah Pike of the Titan-class vessel Red Dawn. I am assuming command of the Armada. Undertake recovery operations for damaged vessels and send over a crew to salvage the Prometheus. We have 2 weeks to repair before we move on. With this battle, we have won the war, but only if we do not waste it. They will rebuild, unless we leave them nothing to rebuild with." "Sir." The captains of the other ships powered down their weapons and began to reorganize. A third of the Armada was now dead or disabled, while the Sacred Dark had suffered a loss of 100%, and it would take them months to build anything back, if they even had the resources to do so. There was still work to be done, but the lingering doubts about the outcome, those were as dead as the ships of the Sacred Dark. Acting Admiral Sarah Pike brought the Prometheus up on screen. A surprising amount of the vessel was intact, a testament to the quality of its armor, but she had no doubt that Admiral Yamamoto was gone. The dead center hit had crippled the bridge and done God knew how much damage to the interior. Absent its compartmentalized design and state-of-the-art auto-power rerouting system, it would have been destroyed. "Why did he sacrifice himself like that?" she asked, but she knew the answer before she finished asking. He knew. He knew he wasn't going to live many more years, that this was his last fight, and he didn't want anyone under his command to die if he could prevent it. If he hadn't taken out the Citadel, we could have lost half the fleet, or even lost the battle entirely. Whatever it takes, it takes. She thought with reverence as the weight of his sacrifice and that of his bridge crew. He must have known they wouldn't survive either. Etched itself onto her soul for the rest of her life. She stood and snapped a salute to the dead. Her dark fingers trembled a little as the magnitude of the day began to hit home for her. Nor was she alone. "We still have a job to do," she told herself, and began to pull up scanning data for the next target, even while recovery vessels shot out of the large ships of war to save or salvage who or what they could. There would be time to mourn later, time to think later. For now there was only work, the work of war.